Sarah Jennings stared at her reflection in the elevator's polished doors, barely recognizing the woman looking back at her. Dark circles rimmed her once vibrant green eyes, and her chestnut hair hung limp around her shoulders. As the numbers ticked upward, her stomach churned with a toxic mixture of dread and shame. Ding! 15th floor. The doors slid open, revealing the sleek, modern offices of Apex Innovations. Sarah's heels clicked against the marble floor as she made her way past rows of cubicles, avoiding eye contact with her coworkers. Their hushed whispers seemed to follow her like a shadow. Did you hear? I can't believe she'd do that to Tom. I always thought they were so happy. Sarah's cheeks burned. If only they knew the truth. At the end of the corridor loomed the corner office of Maxwell Crawford, CEO of Apex Innovations and the source of Sarah's torment. She paused at his assistant's desk, her hand trembling as she reached for the doorknob. He's expecting you, the assistant said, her voice dripping with barely concealed judgment. Sarah nodded, took a deep breath, and entered the lion's den. Maxwell sat behind his massive mahogany desk, a predatory smile playing on his lips as he watched her approach. At 45, he was still handsome in a sharp, dangerous way, all angular features and steel gray eyes that seemed to cut right through her. Sarah, darling, right on time. She flinched at the endearment. Mr. Crawford, I can't do this anymore. Please, I'm begging you. Let me go. Maxwell's smile vanished, replaced by a cold mask of indifference. He stood, circling his desk like a shark closing in on its prey. Now, we've been over this. You know the deal. Sarah's mind raced back to that fateful night 3 months ago. The company gala, the spiked drink, the compromising photos. Maxwell's ultimatum, become his mistress or watch her career and marriage crumble as he released the damning evidence. My husband, Sarah whispered, her voice breaking. Tom doesn't deserve this. He's a good man. Ah, yes, Tom, Maxwell sneered. The high school sweetheart turned small-town mechanic. Tell me, Sarah, does he satisfy you the way I do? Can he give you the life you deserve? Anger flared in Sarah's chest, momentarily overpowering her fear. Don't you dare speak about him like that. Tom is twice the man you'll ever be. Maxwell's hand shot out, gripping her arm with bruising force. Watch your tone, he hissed. Remember, I own you now. One word from me, and your perfect little life comes crashing down. Tears stung Sarah's eyes as she wrenched her arm free. You're a monster! Perhaps, Maxwell conceded with a cold laugh. But I'm a monster with power. Now be a good girl and clear your schedule for this weekend. We're taking my private jet to the Cayman Islands. Sarah's heart sank. Another weekend of forced smiles and stolen kisses, all while her sweet, unsuspecting Tom thought she was away on a business trip. Oh, and Sarah? Maxwell called as she turned to leave. Wear that little red number I bought you. You know how much I love you in red. The door clicked shut behind her, and Sarah leaned against it, struggling to breathe. How had her life come to this? She was trapped, suffocating under the weight of Maxwell's threats and her own guilt. As she made her way back to her office, Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from Tom. Can't wait to see you tonight, babe. I love you more than anything. Remember that. A sob caught in her throat. Tom's unwavering love and trust only made her betrayal more agonizing. She had to find a way out of this nightmare, but how? Maxwell held all the cards, and she was nothing more than a pawn in his twisted game. Little did Sarah know, as she sank into her chair and buried her face in her hands, that her world was about to shift on its axis once again. For across town, in a small grease-stained garage, Tom Jennings was about to stumble upon a clue that would set in motion a chain of events that neither Sarah nor Maxwell could have ever anticipated. The game was far from over, and Tom Jennings was not a man to be underestimated. Tom Jennings wiped his oil-stained hands on a rag, his brow furrowed in concentration. The vintage Mustang he'd been restoring for the past month was finally coming together, its engine purring like a contented cat. Usually the satisfaction of a job well done would have brought a smile to his face. But today a nagging worry gnawed at the edges of his mind. Sarah, his Sarah, something had changed in her over the past few months. The vibrant, laughing woman he'd fallen in love with in high school seemed to have faded, replaced by a shadow that moved through their home with downcast eyes and forced smiles. At first, he'd chalked it up to stress from her new promotion at Apex Innovations. But now, Tom shook his head, trying to dispel the doubts that had taken root. Sarah loved him. He knew that. Whatever was bothering her, they'd face it together. That's what marriage was all about, right? Hey, Tommy boy! The booming voice of his best friend and business partner, Mike, echoed through the garage. Tom looked up to see the burly man striding towards him, a greasy pizza box balanced on one hand. I thought you could use a break and some brain food, Mike said, setting the box down on a nearby workbench. You've been burning the midnight oil lately. Tom managed a weak smile. Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Mike's jovial expression faltered as he studied his friend's face. All right, spill it. What's eating you? For a moment, Tom considered brushing off the question, but the weight of his worries was becoming too much to bear alone. It's Sarah, he admitted. Well, something's not right, Mike, she said, distant, distracted. And these business trips, they never used to happen this often. Mike's eyes narrowed. You think she might be? No! Tom's response was immediate and vehement. God, no! Sarah would never. It's not like that. Okay. Mike held up his hands in surrender. Just checking all the angles. So, what do you think it is? Tom ran a hand through his hair, leaving a streak of grease. I don't know, but I'm worried about her, man. It's like she's carrying some kind of burden, and she won't let me help. Mike was quiet for a moment, then said, You know, my cousin works in IT over at Apex. Maybe he could do some digging, see if there's anything fishy going on at work. Tom hesitated. The idea of snooping into Sarah's professional life felt wrong, a violation of trust. But the memory of Sarah's tear-stained face as she'd left for her business trip this morning steeled his resolve. Do it, he said. But tell him to be careful. I don't want Sarah to get in any trouble. Mike nodded, pulling out his phone. I'm on it. We'll get to the bottom of this, Tommy, I promise. As Mike stepped away to make the call, Tom's eyes fell on the framed photo of him and Sarah that sat on his desk. It was from their wedding day, both of them radiant with joy and love, his jaw clenched with determination. Whatever was hurting Sarah, whatever secrets she was keeping, he'd find out, and he'd move heaven and earth to make things right. Little did Tom know that across the ocean, in a luxurious Cayman Islands resort, Sarah was at that very moment staring out at the turquoise waters, her heart aching for home, for him. And in the room behind her, Maxwell Crawford was making a phone call that would set in motion a series of events that would change all their lives forever. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the garage, Tom's phone buzzed with a message from Mike's cousin. His heart raced as he opened it, not knowing that the information contained within would be the first domino to fall in a cascade that would expose a web of lies, betrayal, and corruption that reached far beyond his small town life. The game was changing, and Tom Jennings was about to show everyone exactly who he was. The Cayman Islands breeze carried the scent of salt and tropical flowers, but to Sarah it might as well have been the stench of her own guilt. She stood on the balcony of the opulent suite, her fingers white-knuckled around the railing, as if it were the only thing keeping her from falling into the abyss. Behind her, the sound of Maxwell's voice drifted from the bedroom, low and menacing. She couldn't make out the words, but the tone sent shivers down her spine. Another shady deal, no doubt. Another secret to add to the mountain of lies threatening to crush her. Sarah's phone buzzed in her pocket, a text from Tom. Her heart clenched as she read it. Missing you like crazy, babe. Can't wait for you to come home. I love you. A tear slid down her cheek. How much longer could she keep up this charade? The weight of her deception was becoming unbearable. Suddenly, Maxwell's voice rose in anger. What do you mean someone's been asking questions? Who? Find out and shut it down. Now! Sarah froze, her blood turning to ice. Had someone discovered their secret? A spark of hope flickered in her chest, quickly extinguished by fear. If Maxwell found out she'd told anyone, the sliding door behind her opened with a bang. Maxwell stormed onto the balcony, his face a mask of fury. We're leaving. Now, pack your things. What? But we just got here yesterday. His hand shot out, gripping her arm painfully. Don't question me. We have a situation to deal with back home. As Sarah stumbled back into the room, her mind raced. What situation? Who had been asking questions? And why did the thought fill her with equal parts terror and relief? Meanwhile, back in their hometown, Tom sat in the dimly lit garage, staring at his computer screen in disbelief. The information Mike's cousin had uncovered was staggering. Financial irregularities at Apex Innovations, offshore accounts. And at the center of it all, Maxwell Crawford. But what hit Tom like a punch to the gut was the trail of emails and calendar entries that painted a damning picture of Sarah's involvement. Business trips that coincided with Crawford's personal travel, late night meetings, expensive gifts. No, Tom whispered, shaking his head. Oh, there has to be an explanation. Mike, who had been reading over his shoulder, placed a hand on Tom's trembling shoulder. I'm so sorry, man, but it looks pretty clear. Tom stood abruptly, his chair clattering to the floor. No, I know my wife. Sarah wouldn't. She couldn't. He trailed off, the evidence before him warring with his heart. What are you going to do? Mike asked softly. Tom's jaw clenched, a steely determination replacing the hurt in his eyes. I'm going to find out the truth, and then I'm going to make sure Crawford pays for whatever he's done to my wife. As if on cue, Tom's phone rang. Sarah's face lit up the screen. With a deep breath, he answered. Hey, babe, you're home early. Sarah's voice cut him off, frantic and tearful. Tom, I need you, please. I've made a terrible mistake. Crawford, Oh, God, Tom, I'm so sorry. Can you meet me? The fear in her voice sent a jolt of protective fury through Tom. Where are you? I'm on my way. As Tom raced out of the garage, Mike called after him. Be careful, man. Crawford's dangerous. But Tom barely heard him. His world had narrowed to a single focus. Sarah needed him. And come hell or high water, he would be there for her. Little did he know that across town, Maxwell Crawford was making his own plans. Plans that would turn this small town drama into a high-stakes game of cat and mouse. The stage was set. The players were in motion. And as the sun set on their quiet town, the first rumbles of an approaching storm began to echo in the distance. The tires of Tom's pickup truck screeched as he pulled into the parking lot of Lookout Point, a secluded area overlooking the town. His heart pounded in his chest, a mixture of anticipation, fear, and barely contained anger fueling his every move. Sarah's car was already there, parked haphazardly near the edge of the lot. Tom spotted her silhouette in the fading light, a solitary figure huddled on a bench facing the valley below. As he approached, Sarah turned, her tear-stained face a mask of anguish and relief. Tom, she whispered, her voice breaking. In 3 long strides, Tom closed the distance between them, enveloping Sarah in his arms. For a moment, they clung to each other, the familiar warmth of their embrace a stark contrast to the turmoil surrounding them. Sarah, Tom said, gently pulling back to look into her eyes. What's going on? What's this about Crawford? Sarah's lower lip trembled as she fought to find the words. I've been such a fool, Tom. Crawford, he's been blackmailing me, forcing me to... As Sarah's story spilled out, the drugged drink, the compromising photos, the threats against their livelihood. Tom's expression hardened. His hands, still resting on Sarah's shoulders, curled into fists. Why didn't you tell me? He asked, his voice low and tight with suppressed emotion. Sarah's eyes filled with fresh tears. I was scared, ashamed. He threatened to ruin us, to destroy everything we've built. I thought I could handle it, protect you from it all. But I was wrong. So wrong. Tom took a deep breath, forcing himself to unclench his fists. Sarah, listen to me. We're in this together. Always. No matter what happens, no matter what that bastard throws at us, we face it as a team. Understood? Sarah nodded, a flicker of the old fire returning to her eyes. What are we going to do? Before Tom could answer, the crunch of gravel announced the arrival of another vehicle. Headlights swept across them as a sleek black SUV pulled into the lot. Oh, God, Sarah gasped. It's Crawford. Tom's posture changed instantly, shifting to place himself between Sarah and the approaching threat. Stay behind me, he growled. Maxwell Crawford emerged from the SUV, his usual polished appearance slightly disheveled. His eyes darted between Tom and Sarah, a mixture of anger and calculation in his gaze. Well, well, he drawled, taking a step forward. Isn't this cozy? Sarah, darling, I thought we had an understanding. The only thing you need to understand, Tom snarled, is that you're going to stay the hell away from my wife. Crawford's lip curled in a sneer. And who's going to make me? The small-town grease monkey? You have no idea who you're dealing with, boy. Oh, I think I do, Tom retorted. A coward who preys on women, a criminal hiding behind a fancy suit and a corporate title. Crawford's composure slipped, rage flashing across his features. "You insolent little—" He reached into his jacket, and Sarah let out a terrified gasp as the moonlight glinted off the barrel of a gun. Time seemed to slow. Tom's mind raced, assessing the situation with a clarity born of adrenaline. In the distance, he heard the wail of approaching sirens. "It's over, Crawford," Tom said, his voice steady despite the gun pointed at his chest. "The police are on their way. We have evidence of your crimes. Your little empire is about to come crashing down." Doubt flickered in Crawford's eyes, his gaze darting between Tom, Sarah, and the road where the sirens were growing louder. In that moment of hesitation, Tom made his move. With a speed that belied his size, he lunged forward, tackling Crawford to the ground. The gun went flying, skittering across the gravel. Sarah screamed as the two men grappled on the ground, fists flying. Despite Crawford's expensive gym membership, he was no match for Tom's raw strength and determination. As the first police car pulled into the lot, lights flashing, Tom pinned Crawford to the ground, his voice a low, dangerous growl. "You made a big mistake coming after my family, Crawford. Now you're going to learn exactly who I am." The night air filled with shouts of police officers and the metallic click of handcuffs. As Crawford was hauled to his feet by two burly cops, his once immaculate suit now torn and dirty, the mask of the powerful CEO finally crumbled. Tom stood, pulling Sarah into his arms as they watched Crawford being read his rights and shoved into the back of a police car. "It's over," Sarah whispered, burying her face in Tom's chest. Tom kissed the top of her head, his arms tightening around her. "No, babe, it's just the beginning. We've got a lot to work through, but we'll do it together." As the adrenaline of the confrontation began to fade, Tom and Sarah stood in each other's embrace, watching the flashing lights recede into the distance. The road ahead would be challenging, but for the first time in months, they both felt a glimmer of hope. The storm had broken, and though the aftermath would be difficult to navigate, they would face it as they always should have, side by side, a united front against whatever the world might throw at them. The following weeks passed in a blur of police statements, legal consultations, and long, emotionally charged conversations. Tom and Sarah's modest home became a fortress against the media frenzy that erupted in the wake of Maxwell Crawford's arrest. The exposure of his criminal activities sent shockwaves through the business world, and Apex Innovations teetered on the brink of collapse. On a crisp autumn morning, Tom sat at the kitchen table, nursing a cup of coffee as he pored over the latest headlines. Crawford Empire crumbles. CEO faces multiple charges. Whistleblower wife, key to taking down corrupt executive. He sighed, running a hand through his disheveled hair. The papers painted Sarah as a hero, but he knew the toll this ordeal had taken on her. The sound of the shower running upstairs reminded him that healing was a process. For both of them. The doorbell rang, startling Tom from his thoughts. He opened the door to find Mike on the porch, holding a grease-stained paper bag. "Breakfast burritos," Mike announced with a grin. "Figured you could use some fuel for the big day." Tom managed a tired smile as he let his friend in. "Thanks, man. I don't know if I'm ready for this." Today marked Sarah's first day back at Apex Innovations. The company, now under new management, had asked her to return and help with the restructuring process. Her intimate knowledge of Crawford's dealings made her invaluable in untangling the web of corruption. Mike clapped a hand on Tom's shoulder. "You've got this, Tommy. Both of you do. What you two have been through, it would have broken most couples, but you're stronger for it." Upstairs, the shower shut off. A few minutes later, Sarah descended the stairs, dressed in a crisp blazer and pencil skirt. Her hair was pulled back in a no-nonsense ponytail, but her eyes still held a hint of uncertainty. "Good morning," she said, her gaze softening as it met Tom's. "Oh, hi, Mike. Are those Rosie's burritos I smell?" The three of them sat around the kitchen table, the familiar routine of sharing a meal providing a semblance of normalcy. As Sarah picked at her food, Tom reached across the table to squeeze her hand. "You don't have to do this, you know," he said softly. "We could pack up, start fresh somewhere else." Sarah shook her head, a determined set to her jaw. "No, I need to do this. For myself, for the other employees who are in the dark about Crawford's schemes. It's time to reclaim my life, my career." Mike raised his coffee mug in a toast. "To new beginnings and to the two toughest people I know." As they clinked mugs, a knock at the door interrupted the moment. Tom answered to find a courier holding a thick manila envelope. "Delivery for Sarah Jennings," the young man announced. Sarah took the envelope, her brow furrowing as she examined the return address. It's from Crawford's lawyers. The room fell silent as she opened it, scanning the contents with wide eyes. It's a confession, she breathed. And, oh my God. What is it? Tom asked, moving to her side. Sarah looked up, tears shimmering in her eyes. He's naming names, other executives, politicians. This goes deeper than we thought. Mike let out a low whistle. Looks like Crawford's trying to cut a deal. Tom's jaw clenched. After everything he put you through, he thinks he can just... No, Sarah interrupted, her voice stronger now. This is good. With this information, we can make sure everyone involved faces justice. Not just Crawford, but the entire corrupt system that allowed this to happen. She stood, gathering the papers in her bag. I need to get this to the FBI and the company lawyers. This changes everything. As Sarah prepared to leave, Tom pulled her into a fierce embrace. I'm so proud of you, he murmured into her hair. You're the strongest person I know. Sarah leaned back, cupping Tom's face in her hands. We are strong together. I couldn't have made it through this without you. Their lips met in a kiss that held the promise of healing, of a love tested by fire and emerging stronger. When they parted, Sarah's eyes shone with a mixture of determination and hope. Ready to change the world? Tom asked with a smile. Sarah nodded, squaring her shoulders. Ready as I'll ever be. As they watched Sarah drive away, Mike turned to Tom. So, what's next for you, Tommy boy? Tom's gaze remained fixed on the horizon, where Sarah's car had disappeared. I'm thinking it's time to expand the business. Maybe open a training program for at-risk youth, teach them a trade. Mike grinned. Now that sounds like a plan. Partners? Partners, Tom agreed, bumping fists with his friend. As the morning sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the quiet street, Tom felt a sense of purpose settling over him. The storm had passed, leaving in its wake not destruction, but opportunity. He and Sarah had weathered the worst together, and now they stood on the precipice of a new chapter. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them as they always should have, side by side, stronger together than they ever were apart. 1 year later, the rhythmic clang of metal on metal filled the air as Tom made his way through the expanded garage. What was once a modest two-bay operation had grown into a bustling center of activity, with 6 repair bays and a large classroom space attached. Looking good, Jason, Tom called out to a young man bent over the engine of a battered pickup. Remember to check the timing belt while you're in there. Jason, a former high school dropout, who'd been one of the first to join Tom's youth training program, flashed a grease-stained grin. You got it, Mr. Jennings. Tom smiled to himself as he continued his rounds. The past year had been a whirlwind of change and growth, not just for the business, but for him and Sarah as well. As he approached his office, he paused to straighten the framed newspaper article hanging on the wall. Local mechanic and whistleblower wife transform scandal into opportunity. The photo showed Tom and Sarah standing proudly in front of their expanded garage, surrounded by the first graduating class of their youth program. It was a far cry from the harrowing nights of uncertainty and fear they'd faced just a year ago. Tom's phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Meeting ran long. On my way now. Can't wait to see you. His heart swelled with pride. Sarah had not only returned to Apex Innovations, but had been instrumental in its complete restructuring. Under new leadership, with Sarah as the head of a newly formed ethics and compliance department, the company was rebuilding its reputation and setting new standards for corporate responsibility. The sound of a car pulling up outside drew Tom's attention. He stepped out just in time to see Sarah emerging from her vehicle, her professional attire a stark contrast to the grease and grime of the garage. There's my beautiful wife, Tom called out, pulling her into an embrace. Sarah laughed, returning the hug despite the risk to her clean clothes. Careful, grease monkey. I've got a board meeting later. As they broke apart, Tom noticed a glimmer of excitement in Sarah's eyes. What's got you so fired up? Sarah grinned, producing a folder from her bag. Remember that idea we talked about? Combining your youth program with internship opportunities at Apex? Tom nodded, his interest piqued. Well, Sarah continued, I just got the green light from the board. We're going to pilot the program next quarter. Your graduates will have a direct pipeline to entry-level positions in our tech and operations departments. Tom's face split into a wide smile. Sarah, that's incredible. Do you know what this could mean for these kids? I do, Sarah said softly, her eyes misting slightly. It's a chance to break the cycle, to give them opportunities we never had at their age. Tom pulled her close again, overwhelmed by the moment. I'm so proud of you, of us. Look at what we've built from the ashes of last year. Sarah nestled into his embrace, sighing contentedly. We are stronger together. We always have been. As they stood there, the sounds of the garage humming around them, Tom reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point. The betrayal, the fear, the moments of doubt. They had weathered it all and emerged not just intact, but stronger and more united than ever. Hey, Sarah said, pulling back to meet Tom's gaze. Well, what do you say we close up early today? I was thinking we could drive up to Lookout Point, watch the sunset like we used to. Tom raised an eyebrow. Lookout Point? Are you sure? After everything that happened there? Sarah nodded, her expression serious but determined. Exactly because of what happened there. It's time we reclaimed that place, made new memories to overshadow the old. Tom considered for a moment, then nodded. You're right. Let's do it. An hour later, they sat on the hood of Tom's truck at Lookout Point, the same spot where their world had nearly fallen apart a year ago. But now, as the setting sun painted the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink, the ghosts of the past seemed to fade away. Sarah leaned her head on Tom's shoulder, their fingers intertwined. You know, she said softly, for a while there, I thought we'd lost everything. Our trust, our future. I was so scared. Tom squeezed her hand. I know, I was too, but we found our way back. We did more than that, Sarah mused. We built something new, something stronger. Who would have thought that the worst moment of our lives would lead to all of this? As the last rays of sunlight dipped below the horizon, Tom turned to face his wife. In the fading light, he saw not just the woman he'd fallen in love with all those years ago, but a partner who had been tested by fire and emerged unbreakable. I love you, Sarah Jennings, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Whatever life throws at us next, we'll face it together. Sarah's eyes shimmered with unshed tears as she leaned in to kiss him. Together, she whispered against his lips. Always. As darkness fell over Lookout Point, Tom and Sarah remained entwined, their silhouettes merging into one against the starlit sky. The past year had taught them the true meaning of resilience, of love tested and triumph. And as they looked to the future, they knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would meet them as they always had, side by side, stronger together than apart.